Welcome everyone to the Electrical Culture of Safety Livewire program, where we delve into all the complexities of creating a culture of safety within the electric utility industry. In each episode, we feature interviews with subject matter experts, industry leaders, safety professionals, and field personnel from across the industry, where we discuss ways to develop a collective reflection of the perception, attitudes, and shared experiences of the safety culture within our industry. Welcome to ECOS Livewire.
Welcome everybody to an ECOS Livewire. We're going to do this a little bit different, kind of impromptu. I don't even know if we know what we're going to talk about, but Miss Cheryl Richardson's here with Richardson Sons Contracting out of New York, and we got Mr. Billy Martin with Think Tank Project, also out of New York. Both are CEOs and presidents of their company, and so we're just going to have a little conversation here. Miss Cheryl was talking about at the end of her, what is it, 061, Cheryl? Lineman Safety National Webinar 061? I think that's yours.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you brought up a really neat thing that you're kind of starting. This will be the first annual, you were saying, this summer, where you're going to do a base camp, a safety base camp for contractors. And you were mentioning allowing the doors to be open for other contractors to come in. You guys are hosting it and coming up with the idea, your idea, and other folks. Can you talk a little bit about that? It sounds like a neat plan.
Sure. So the safety base camp, now I'm just spitballing right here because I haven't gotten the support of everyone here, but the whole idea is really to, first of all, we're always getting in the door with safety. So safety is important, and we know that. We haven't included, contractors don't get together for safety, and I don't see a good reason why we haven't. It's just because it's the way we've always done things. We've always competed, and this is one of those things that we don't get together for. So my plan for the base camp is really to have a lot of little refresher centers, so we're not expecting people to sit for a long time, but just go around and get some of the like field refresher type centers, and bring the other contractors together. Hopefully they will also, I'll set up their tents and everything. All they have to do is bring people in and have a center, some sort of a best practice type center. And people like bierermeters hopefully will come in to share some knowledge. And as I was thinking about the base camp, I was thinking that really we're really talking about decreasing CUSP, but we oftentimes miss the fact that suicide rate is so high, and so is the overdose rate. And I'll give you an example. We had a young man from our organization take his life, and when it was time for the funeral, I had people asking, "Can I please bring the truck to the funeral? Can I please put a flag at the funeral?" And I said, "Well, of course you're going to do that, right?" Went to the funeral, had a huge presence there. It was really important to his family because that was how he thought of himself. And afterwards, I had a meeting at the union, and they said, "Oh my gosh, that was so great what you did at that funeral to bring all those trucks in." And I realized if this man had died on a power line, that would happen. But when we have a suicide, we don't. It's like it loses some importance or something. So just want to really support suicide with that. And my thinking there is that we do everything we can in terms of trying to train ourselves and watch people and watch our brothers and take care of them. But we really have to look at that intrinsic portion of these people where we can't catch them when they're linemen. We have to start to mention suicide and talk about all the pressures they're going to be under as they move through the ranks when they're at that boot camp, and really say the word suicide. Start to say it and acknowledge it as a problem instead of kind of glossing over it and trying to pretend like the power line, safety is the most important part. So that's kind of my thinking for the base camp, and then the proceeds will go to hopefully starting. If our local union is willing to start a program, great. If we have to do something else, we'll do that. But I just want to start to kind of finance that building of that.
That's a great idea. So would one of the stations actually be on suicide training and talking about it and discussing it?
That's a great point. So yeah, certainly we're going to make it light so it isn't, we can't listen to an all day of suicide.
Right.
And the other thing is sometimes when you bring those uncomfortable, when you title things those or have too much of it, people don't show up because they are uncomfortable with it. So definitely there will be some of those stations will address mental illness and suicide.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. I think we need to bring that into our industry more and more. What do you think about that, Billy?
I think it's brilliant, first of all, to have a base camp where the contractors come together I said, I think that's brilliant, because until we seem to think that we're all siloed in this industry, but really we're competing for the work, but there's lots of work. So we need to realize that we're all one team trying to accomplish the same thing. And I think the part that we're missing is there's an invisible piece that occurs when you do that. So Cheryl, by you having a base camp and bringing everybody together, these contractors, some of them know each other, some of them don't. But when you put them in that atmosphere, they start to know each other deeper. And I know we talked about one of the stations being self-rescue. And I've talked about that a little bit in the industry, and we aren't doing this. We do pole top rescue as a line team all the time, annually. And honestly, as I go around the country, there's a pretty low percentage of people that actually have to rescue somebody, and if you do, they're pretty much traumatized because it was either someone who's died on the job or somebody who's very badly hurt. So we don't want to do pole top rescue, but it's a perishable skill, so we need to practice it. But we learn in concepts. Like when you buy a new car and you're driving down the road, you see that car everywhere, and you're not looking for it. It does that without your permission. So when we learn in concepts, it creates patterns, so we see things. So what I think we're going to do at your base camp, with this conversation we had before this, is do self-rescue. So what that means is we'll learn some skills to get yourself out of a bucket or off a pole if you're hung up. Now, most tree trimmers will know how to do that because they have those skills. But that brings up the other thing, that we haven't connected everybody even in our, right now out there who's watching this, you have a job brief and there's flaggers over there that aren't connected with you. They're standing separate. And the tree trimmers are here today, but they're standing separate. We need all brief together, right? But anyway, so back to this self-rescue thing. If we learn self-rescue and you practice it, it's a transferable skill. Do you know how many hunters fall out of tree stands every year?
Yeah.
6,400. A lineman learning how to do self-rescue could actually transfer that skill to a tree stand. But when you get to the mental health station, he can also transfer that skill to dialing 988, because dialing 988 is self-rescue. And when you're got to that point where you're on that edge, all you need to do is dial 3 numbers. And if you've got a concept of self-rescue, I think your base camp could help mental health. Honestly, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Did that make any sense, or are people going to say that we're nuts?
That made good sense to me. I love the self-rescue because it really does tie in with mental health. It ties in with so many things.
Right.
Just, a strong, sort of an inner strength that we need to start to build.
And I would like to, you're talking about self-rescue, I would like to have a plan implemented within our line crews to where we actually have a close teamwork, a network and team within that. And so when you're on for instance, back in the day, playing football, we would, if we were tired, self-rescue, hey, I got to go out for a few plays, or hey, I need some help over here on this next block. We've got to be able to talk to the folks around us when we're hurting, when we're feeling a little weak today. Maybe we didn't get enough sleep. Maybe our stomach's bothering us, or our ankle's really sore. We need maybe we have some issues at home, some stress because of financial issues or mental issues. But we need to make it to where it's okay, self-rescue, where it's okay that we reach out to one another, and it's accepted, and it's okay. And that needs to be something that I notice a lot of linemen in the industry. They isolate themselves and compartmentalize their minds from each other. And to me, it almost does the opposite of what you would rather have, which is help. And when you compartmentalize yourself from everybody, and you isolate yourself from one another, that the exact opposite of what you should be doing, which is to reach out to folks. But it's not okay to do so. We're looked down upon, we're frowned upon. Some people might make fun of folks because maybe they're not as tough as we perceived ourselves to be, and we're embarrassed. And actually the exact opposite is the truth. And we need to make it where it's okay to self-rescue and help each other out. It's all right.
You know, banter amongst a team is really good. It's real camaraderie. But it's a really fine line to go from banter to ridicule. And if we do things that connect us, like we do pull top rescue every year, and fortunately we don't do a lot of them, and that might be because we practice it, because it's called the RPD model, recognition primed decision making. And I'm not making this up. The guy's author's name is Gary Klein, and his firm was actually hired to retool the Situation Room for the White House, to change it, to make it flow better so they could get higher cognitive decisions, right? So if you're doing like self-rescue and you create an environment where you're more connected, then you do recognize that guy. Say, hey, you know, Brent, you should take a minute. You know, you're looking a little hot today. Rather than have you pass out from heat exhaustion or heat stroke, I might see it ahead of time because it's recognition primed, because you create a pattern by having that. So little things like your base camp, things like having a job brief where you, hey, tree trimmers, come on in here, get into the huddle. You ever seen a football team on the play, they're getting ready for a play? Do you know they huddle every 40 seconds? You ever seen them in a huddle and one guy stands up, hey, dude, I'm not participating in this huddle today. You ever see that happen? We allow that in our industry.
We do.
And it's time we realize if it's okay if you can't play on a team, but become a solo traveling operator in a substation or something. It's okay. Maybe that's not your skill. But this is a team sport. And the team sport not only will help SIFs, but the main causes of death that Cheryl mentioned, drugs, alcohol, and suicide.
And Billy, I also think, just to get back to what Brent was saying about compartmentalizing, I know you've had some meetings where you ask people who they are or what they are, and we talk about putting that shield on, and some of the responses you got, which had nothing to do with these guys' personal lives, they were only going to say, I am a lineman. They weren't going to say, I am a dad, and those sorts of things, right?
Yeah, so I'll be talking about this tomorrow, actually, in the ECOS thing, but I've been doing these little experiments while I go around, just like you do, social experiments, and I ask people, tell me something you are, and I've already done this with you, but if I ask Cheryl, she's a mom and she's a business owner and all these things. When I ask linemen, tell me something you are, they say, I'm 5'9". I'm a lineman, and it's not their fault. What you're talking about, the separation isn't their fault.
Right.
They're the same as Navy SEALs, anybody in this industry, because we're expected on a moment's notice to tell our family, hey, I can't go on that vacation. I can't go to your basketball game. I can't go to dinner. They actually get Navy SEALs to separate self from the mission. We do it on the job. So anybody in this industry, whether you're a lineman, anybody that's working in this industry will drop everything when the storm hits. So we get them to separate themselves from the mission.
Yeah.
And then they can't get it back.
Right.
So I did the same thing that Cheryl mentioned with a group of planners, indoor planners. And they came up with, oh, I'm a guitar player, or I'm an empath, or I'm a grandmother. And the really cool thing, Cheryl, is if I know that you're a grandmother and we're working together and I see you doing something that might be stupid, I can say, hey, Cheryl, your grandkid going to be okay with what you're about to do? But if I don't know that layer never comes up.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about. We want to be able to say, hey, little self-rescue here, take a break. We have to know each other to that level. And I think that's where we're headed. I think the change is starting. It has to be modeled by the top, though. We need a mental model, shared mental model of what that looks like. So leadership has to realize that that's a new leadership principle. Is that we have to know people to that level.
I agree.
Yeah, so it was interesting. Late last year, I was invited to give some presentations for a statewide electrical cooperative statewide, and they did the apprentice rodeo. There's about 100 apprentices. It was pretty well attended from all around this particular state. And then at the next day is when I gave some presentations and some training. And one of the things I asked them is, and I kind of got in their face a little bit, because I like to do that. just give everybody a challenge. I like to leave a challenge. And I asked them, so they had these stations that the lineman would go and practice tying knots and a little speed this and speed that, and grounding on a little pegboard kind of thing, and just different stations, changing out an arm, pole top rescue, things like that. And I asked them, I said, how come the mystery event, how come you all don't consider maybe having as the mystery event communication skills, leadership skills? Why is it always got to be doing with your hands and not with your head as far as connecting with one another? And I told them, I said, how come when somebody comes to as an employee, a potential employee, to work with you all, and they want to begin in your apprenticeship program, how come when you sit them down, you talk with them, you don't tell them that working as a line team is a condition of employment? Are you okay with that? If you want to come on board, one of the conditions of employment for you to come on board is you've got to work as a line team. And then what does that mean? How do we do that? Why are we doing that? What's it matter? And it was pretty interesting seeing everybody kind of looking around the room at everybody else, and it's like, what? So this is what I think you all are talking about as far as thinking that next level. What are we missing? And that's what we're missing, with that human interaction and that connectivity.
So what you're talking about, Brent, is invisible. And Cheryl talked about it in her last talk, that how people, 061, the ECOS talk, is those intrinsic motivating values are invisible. We're focused on the compliance and the rule, because that's visible. But that's outcome. You're looking at outcome. But there's always this really strong power that's invisible that steers us to the outcome.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so hard, because we're looking for something we can't see. You know, it's do you remember when fibromyalgia came out? Is it Malaysia? It's a disease.
Oh, fibromyalgia.
Myalgia,
Yeah.
Malaysia. That's
Yeah.
a country.
I don't know anything about it though.
Fibromyalgia. Yeah, so I was in
I'm out there, too.
fibromyalgia. Yeah, I'm headed there tomorrow. Yeah. So fibromyalgia. So I remember women. So if you go to the hospital and you say, I'm having some chest pain, they'll do a workup for you on chest pain. If Cheryl goes to the hospital and says, I'm having some discomfort in my chest, they'll say, oh, it's probably anxiety. We should probably put you on some anxiety medicine. Because she's a woman. It's not fair, right? But when fibromyalgia first came out, it was, if a woman had it, it was like, that was not real. I can't see it, so it doesn't exist.
Right.
We're doing that in this industry.
Yeah,
We
that's
can't
right.
see that dynamic between us. So it's not. So we focus on the rules, compliance, get the work done. And I think we're waking up. I think, and the younger generation particularly, I'm pretty excited about the younger generation. They're that generation that grew up with a cell phone. It's not their fault either. You know, it was a punishment to go to my room, right, and yours. It's not anymore. right.
Yeah.
So they're brilliant neurons, because every generation has a higher IQ. All by itself, screaming in the parking lot isn't going to work. But when they learn how to connect, we're going to see some really, really great things. And I think it's our job to help create the environment that connection happens. And that's invisible.
So there's a couple things. One is the intrinsic. You were talking about, Billy. You're talking about how powerful that is. The thing that we cannot see in our industry, the thing that we're blind to, is yet the most powerful thing that we need to have introduced, like your base camp, Cheryl. That's the most powerful thing, is things that we cannot see. I was at just an example, I was at another statewide, a different statewide last year, and sitting around with the safety guy, the safety director of the statewide, and the compliance, loss control, loss prevention, loss control of the statewide as well. And what was interesting is communicating with the compliance man as far as creating a line team. And talking with him, it was amazing. Talking with him, it was like I was talking to somebody in a foreign language, because he's compliant. He's focused on the compliance.
Extrinsic.
Yeah, the extrinsic. And everything I was saying as far as working together as a line team and coming together and communicate and training all your apprentices about leadership and communication. Day one, not just how to climb a pole. Spend 30 minutes training about leadership, communication as well day one. And honestly, it was like I was speaking in a room that was just full of crickets. It just went right over his head. Now the safety director, he caught it. And you can tell when someone catches it or when it goes over the head of somebody else. And but seeing the difference between the guy that caught it in the same statewide and then the guy that it was just way over his head, something so simple as, hey, how you doing, man? How you feeling today?
Huge.
And that was over his head.
Yeah.
And it's not his fault. It's what we've created.
Yeah.
I mean, so Cheryl's going to do a base camp, right? So there's no rule for Cheryl to do base camp. So Cheryl, what's driving you to do the base camp?
Intrinsic motivation, I guess. It's just something that I like to help people, and I like to see, I like to improve safety, but now we're dealing with suicide, so that's the real problem.
Yeah, you had that one group you talk about that this one show up, and you asked them, well, you know, what's she was just talking about this. What connects them? You know, what is it that makes them synchronize so well? And the whole idea of synchrony, remember, is if the orchestra's playing a nice tune, you can tell when somebody's out of tune, I can fix it. But if it's chaos, you can't. So this team is in sync. And Cheryl asked them, and they don't know because it's invisible.
Right.
Well,
Can't see it.
she said she gave them 4 days to think about it. They're like, yeah, we have no idea, right?
Yeah.
And that invisible thing is safety becomes a product of that environment. If we're aimed at safety, maybe we're missing that safety is a product. And if it is, then we can aim at communication, connection, and competence, right? And then that interaction creates a safe environment.
That's right.
Right? And I think it's time we start looking at what we really need to aim at.
Yeah.
Because you know the quote, right? What we see is determined by what we aim at. And we get what we aim at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of times I get to, we're talking about your electric reality. I talk to them, where did you start? You know, what's the common denominator? So we got all these SIFs, and you brought that up today, Cheryl. We got all these serious injuries and fatalities. What's the common denominator, the cause of these SIFs? And you get the OSHA report, and you get these investigations, and he made contact with the conductor. And the thing is, they don't talk about how horrible his night was the night before, or his foreman just got done screaming at him and calling him all kinds of names under the sun that you would never want to talk to your best friend with these words. And they don't talk, they ignore the root cause analysis, ignores the true root cause, and as far as what's in their minds. And I always like to bring, how do you measure that, right? The intrinsic, the unseen. How do you measure that? And it's kind of simple. And Cheryl, you brought it up, showing the good deeds. That's measuring. That is seeing results of changing the system. And it's like, how'd you start in this life, this matrix, where the matrix, you end up learning this and doing that, and pretty soon you forget the main thing, where the main thing when you began is you were brought out of the womb and placed in your parents' arms, and they showed you love and compassion. And so that's how it started. And then when you end, you're hoping when it's time that you got to leave this earth, that you're hoping your family's around you too. And well wishes and your friends are around you as you go adios out of this realm. So the main thing started at the beginning, and the main thing is at the end. But what about the middle? Everything in between. That's where we lose sight.
It's the journey we seek. The destination will reveal itself in time. We don't miss the ride. Right?
Yeah.
And if I had one wish for this industry, so Cheryl's base camp is going to start bringing contractors together. That's huge.
Yeah, huge.
And if we all believe the same thing about what we want to have happen, and we can all get on the same side of the rudder, we can steer that ship with one rudder.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to use whack-a-ball and figure all of these things, right? And if I had a wish, You just mentioned something, you know, how do you measure that intrinsic, right? How do you measure, when we create that environment and then those events don't happen, how do you measure and manage things that don't happen, right? So we're obsessed with measuring data.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have an article coming out, what precedes a near miss. In order to have a near miss program, you have to have a near miss. In order to have an incident analysis, you have an incident. It would be my wish that we get the entire industry to get on the side of the rudder to start creating an environment where we can share concerns. Because if you and I are it's safe for me to share a concern with Cheryl, we will change a decision, right? Because a concern is a prediction of an unwanted outcome. And if we can, that's way ahead of the incident. But who has a concerns program? Well, you do. but it's, I think we can shift further into the realm of the invisible.
Yeah.
And we can still do the compliance and the data. It's not an either or.
Right.
Yeah, I think that one of the maybe one of the advantages I've had with not growing up in the industry is that I didn't see things like the root cause analysis, where you have an incident, you go through a series of steps, and then you end it. You make a decision. This is how it is. We're going to change a job. If we're going to do this, there's a start and an end. Pretty much everything we're doing at HRS doesn't have an end, and we know that. And that's okay. You can't. The people who've been in the industry can't imagine a root cause analysis where we have an incident, we get to the end, we say, oh, it could have been this or this. Let's try this. Let's reevaluate this in a year. They don't like that. They want it to end, and they want to be finished.
That's right.
So I think you have to open people up to being okay with trying things that don't have an end or are hard to manage or measure. That's a little bit of the challenge, I think.
I think we're hung up on the word failure. I don't use that word. There is no failure. There's either an unexpected or an unwanted outcome. And then it's not why did you do it and who is to blame. It's how did we see that working out? What can we do to produce a better outcome? It's very simple. That's moving forward. And if we start looking forward, you know, that rearview mirror, the story is a lot smaller than the windshield for a reason, right? Because we're supposed to go forward. But I think there's small things we can do. Tiny changes, amazing results, from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, right? There's tiny things that don't cost any money that we can start to enlist, and then actually get the workforce to test, evaluate, and provide feedback and see if they value it. Because honestly, if there's a tool I want to test, I give it to the worker. And if they value it, they'll use it. And if they don't, they'll tell me, and it'll sit in their box or they'll bring it home.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know where this is going to go, Brent, but
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys coming here and having this little conversation. And it's been a great morning, great day. So, Mr. Jeremy, I appreciate all your videography and everything you're doing with this as well. It's very professional, and a lot of folks are getting the message. So we just need to grow together. And Cheryl, what you're doing, the base camp is, I think it's genius. And it's bringing folks together that normally it's something that's not embraced, as far as coming together and breaking down the walls of division between us and between not just companies but us as people. So I like what you're doing.
Thank you.
So we'll support that, absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. I challenge the people watching this, Brent. We're just having a conversation. Take a moment to have a conversation, right? We're driven by the work. We're driven to get it done, get it done, get it done. Take a moment, have a conversation in your own company, you know, and if it's okay to miss one of the 1,000 meetings management has, to actually go down to the work site. It's harder for the worker to get into a management meeting than it is for a manager to get into their job brief and in their huddle. And we really need to start a huddle right after that job brief's done. You know, we need to create this huddle so we're connected.
Right.
And the management team is part of that team. So I think you just created a model for the whole industry.
Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think oftentimes the people who are in management, I don't think they have any idea what kind of impact they make going out into the field. I can tell you from my own standpoint, it can be uncomfortable, and especially in the beginning until you really know what you're doing out there or have an idea. So I think that those people forget how much they can do by just getting out in the field to connect.
That's great.
Yeah.
Just being present.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's much needed. I like that. All right. We appreciate everybody joining in, and feel free to contact Miss Cheryl, contact Mr. Billy, and you all have some work to do. So I think this conversation has proved that. So take it and let's all grow by it. Let's do this together.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.